You're watching City Channel 4, your window to our community.
I'm the chair of the Iowa City Human Rights Commission. Welcome to the 33rd Annual Iowa City Human Rights Commission's Award Breakfast. We're very honored to have you here today. Martin Luther King wrote, "We may have all come on different ships, but we're in the same boat now." And on racism, he wrote, "Until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. And only in the darkness can you see the stars." Annually, the Commission holds this award breakfast to highlight the work that is occurring in our city, to celebrate human rights by recognizing impressive and worthy individuals, organizations in our community, and to hear the inspiring words of our distinguished keynote speaker. I would like to share a brief history of the Commission and what we do. The Human Rights Commission was established in August 1963 by the City Council to serve as a community resource addressing issues of inequalities that were occurring at that time. Today, 53 years later, we continue to address inequality and injustice, as well as provide community outreach on matters of discrimination, bias, and human rights. Current members of the Human Rights Commission, in addition to myself, are Vice Chair Kim Hanahan, Andrea Cohen, Adel Adams, Joe Coulter, Paul Reddish, Eliza Willis, Barbara Kutzko, and D'Angelo Bailey. Please identify yourself and stand if you can to be recognized. Thank you. In addition to the very distinguished group of honorees we are recognizing this morning, we also have with us past honorees and former human rights commissioners, elected officials from around the area, and Iowa City staff representing a variety of different city departments. Please stand if you can to be recognized. In closing, I would like to acknowledge all of you gathered this very early wet morning to support our annual awards program honoring selfless acts by human rights defenders. Your support is very much appreciated. Finally, I leave you with the words written during the 13th century by a Muslim Sufi mystic poet, Rumi, that still resonates today. "When the goodwill of hearts is with you, fountains of wisdom will begin to flow from within your own being. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there." Thank you. Kim, will you please do the honor of introducing our distinguished keynote speaker, Ms. Diane Finnerty.
Hello and good morning. My name is Kim Hanrahan, and I am Vice Chair for the Iowa City Human Rights Commission. Our keynote speaker today is Diane Finnerty, who currently serves as Assistant Provost for Faculty in the University of Iowa Office of the Provost, and holds an adjunct faculty appointment in the University of Iowa School of Social Work. Diane has worked at the University of Iowa in varying capacities since 1994 and has over 25 years' experience working with individuals and organizations on issues of cultural competence, racial justice, immigration, LGBT identity, and alliance building. In addition, Diane has not only served on the Human Rights Commission, but also has been a recipient of a Human Rights Award in the past. This morning, Diane will talk on imagining a world in which Black and brown lives mattered. Please join me in welcoming my friend, Diane Finnerty.
Good early morning to you. I've been so enjoying these fall gorgeous days we've been having, and so waking up this morning to the thunder and the lightning and the rain And having to get here by 7:30 was hurting just a little bit. So thank you all for making the journey in the autumnal weather that we never know what it is here in Iowa. Let me first say a few words before I have the honor of offering some comments, and then for us to get to the business of what we're really here for, and that's to honor the 2016 award recipients. But I would like to ask you all to begin by, to join me. I'm getting quite a reverberation. Is that better? I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking the Iowa City Human Rights Commission, and especially City of Iowa City Equity Director Stephanie Bowers, who is always buzzing around this event, for continuing this tradition. It's one of my... I enjoy coming here every year, and as we all know, the struggle for social justice is long and hard, and we need moments of celebration along the way. So thank you all for continuing this tradition. I also want to give a special thank you to a couple individuals who made particular contributions. On your program, you will see a beautiful image that was offered to this year's celebration by Kate Goodvin, and I understand she's here. Yay! The talented artist. Thank you so much, and congratulations on incredible talent. And Katie Linder. Katie, are you here? She's a City of Iowa City employee who helped me develop a survey, and I want to give a special shout out to Katie as well. So I have, Stephanie Bowers will keep me on time, and I have about 15 minutes, and I'm going to mark that. And I know already in 1 minute, so I will not go over it. I have been a commissioner. I know how Stephanie rolls, and this is an event that she wants to enjoy, get you in, get you out, get you back to your workplaces in a very efficient manner. So I'll do my very, very best, Stephanie. So let me begin my remarks, though, with a confession. When I was first asked by the commission to present this year's breakfast keynote, I was quite hesitant. And in fact, I expressed my honor at being asked and thought of for this honor, but also said, you know, I've had the opportunity to speak to this group in different kinds of means before. Please let the commission know that, and have them, would they like to rethink that decision? And that went back to the commission, came back, yes, please do. And so I humbly accepted this opportunity. As I talk today, I'll reflect on that decision. And what it means to be in a community that is not only trying to imagine a world in which Black and brown lives matter, but to actually create it. So then when asked a couple weeks later what the title would be, I thought there's no way I can, in this historic moment, speak to a group on human rights and not acknowledge and honor the incredible organizing going on in our society right now on Black and brown lives matters. The movement that started in July 2013, so I'd like to reflect on that for a bit. I also know that it is not my job, nor my right, to describe what a world would look like that in which brown and Black lives mattered, and so I worked with Katie to create a bit of a survey, and so I have some ideas and thoughts and requests from community members about what that would look like, and then a challenge to all of us about, so what are we going to do next? The movement Black Lives Matter was created in July 2013 by Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi, and it was created particularly by a social media post that Alicia put out after learning of the not guilty verdict in the killing of Trayvon Martin. Garza immediately thought of her younger brother, who was about the same size and build as Trayvon, and felt it could just as easily have been him who was killed. She wrote an impassioned post on social media that ended with the phrase, "All lives matter, Black lives matter." In 2015 interview, Garza said, "The only thing I remember from that evening, other than crying myself to sleep that night, was the way in which I, as a Black person, felt incredibly vulnerable, incredibly exposed, and incredibly enraged. It was a verdict that said, Black people are not safe in America." Activist Patrice Cullors saw Garza's post, created a hashtag, and began sharing it to foster a discussion about protecting the dignity and affirming the value of Black lives. The next day, Garza and Kohler spoke with immigrant rights activist Opal Tometi, and they set up Tumblr and Twitter accounts and encouraging users to share stories. And from that, the reinvigoration of a movement was born. The movement was then further galvanized with the killing of Michael Brown and the Ferguson movement and the killing of so many others since. As the founders and the participants would say, Black Lives Matter is not a movement with a singular purpose. It's not a quote-unquote civil rights movement, Garza would say, but rather a human rights movement that now has 30 chapters in cities around the United States, and a broad policy agenda that you can get to on their website if you do Black Lives Matter, that was developed by collaboration of over 50 organizations in the United States to pull forth and say, here is a comprehensive agenda about what would need to be in place to achieve the vision of a world in which brown and Black lives matter. We also know at the same time we have multiple movements. We've got dreamers, undocumented youth who are demanding humanity. We have people standing in protest, indigenous leaders, elders at the Dakota Access Pipeline, and we've got the federal government. We don't see it much in we see it in social media, we don't see it much in mainstream media, about the responses to those actions. We see athletes taking a knee. We see 2,000 Seattle public school teachers and employees walking out last month in solidarity. And with, of course, organized action comes organized resistance, not dissimilar to the civil rights movement that we like to hearken back to. Somebody born in 1960, about before my time and during my time. But the surveys in, of course, the 50s and 60s said that 63% of Americans at that time said the leaders of the civil rights movement pushed, quote, too fast. 57% said civil rights activists were violent. 58% said they hurt their own cause by choosing their techniques. In an article I found written by Sean King, journalist Sean King, asking, "Dear white America, which form of protest do you actually prefer?" And he states, so exactly which form of protest do you actually prefer? You hate it when Cleveland Browns player Andrew Hawkins wore a "I Can't Breathe" t-shirt before a game. You hated when LeBron James did the same thing. You hated when several players from the St. Louis Rams simply put their hands up in the air before a game in solidarity with unarmed victims of police brutality. When we march across the country, you mock us. When we block intersections and hold up traffic, your blood boils. When we simply express our concerns on Twitter and Facebook, we receive extreme opposition. So I'm just wondering, which forms of protest do you prefer? For I have yet to see a form of protest that you actually agree with. We also can't live in this moment without looking at the 2016 presidential election. And I am not going to go partisan, but I do want to pull what that means for climate in our nation. The Southern Poverty Law Center, if you know of their incredible work that's long-standing, both tracking hate groups, training civil rights activists, defending people who are victims of violence, hate crimes and violence. They did a recent survey of approximately 2,000 teachers and found that more than 2/3 reported that students, mainly immigrants, children of immigrants, Muslims, students perceived to be Muslims, students of color, have expressed concerns or fear about what might happen to them or their families after the election. Teachers shared that students think that all Black Muslims, brown people will be sent back to Africa. Latino students carry their birth certificates and Social Security cards to school in fear of being deported and stuck behind that big wall. A friend shared a story about his 7-year-old that I asked if I may share. He is a Mexican national, and his partner is a white U.S. Person, so they have a beautiful child, 7-year-old child, who would be identified as multiracial, biracial. And they were talking, and it wasn't at my friend's insistence, but the child shared that what he had figured out he would do after the election is that during the summer, when his pigmentation was browner, he would live in Mexico. But during the winter, when his pigmentation was lighter, he would come back to Iowa and the United States. And this, from the beauty and the wisdom and the saturation of a 7-year-old. So the presentation is about, can we even imagine a world in which brown and black lives matter? Because it is certainly not difficult to imagine a world in which they do not. And I will not fill this speech with all of the data that we know exists in terms of disparities in every single system in our society. You all are doing the work to change that, and I applaud you, and we need to do even more concerted effort to change that. My topic today is, can we even imagine it? Can we imagine it differently? Merriam-Webster defines imagination as the ability to imagine things that are not real. The ability to form a picture in your mind of something that you have not seen or experienced. The ability to think of new things, something that only exists or happened in your mind. And so I engaged in this survey of what people in our community would need to see to imagine this as a possibility. I got 36 respondents, right? This is for those of you who might be scholars in this is not a scientific survey, let me just start right there. And I got 36 respondents, so I'm not going to be making any huge predictions on this or scientific papers off of it. But I did gather comments and information that I think illuminates our imagination. 36 respondents, about 50% of them were people of color, and for the sake of today's presentation, I am going to focus particularly on some of those statements as the commitment to those most affected by disparities are the ones who need to define the change that is needed. In the same way that if we were having a conversation about gender, I would struggle if a man was up here saying what a world in which women are valued would look like, right? So in the same way, these are the voices helping us understand that. I think, this is a quote, I'm just going to read some of the stories. I think a world in which black and brown lives mattered would take a look at policies and systems that were put in place during times when black and brown lives didn't matter openly. Look at the nuances of those policies and how they indirectly target certain groups, and have an open mind and thought process to change. Another person. If we lived in a world in which brown and black lives mattered, we would not fear that a routine stop by police could be the end of our lives. We would not see more concern about the death of a gorilla than the death of a black or brown human being. We would not see people minimizing racist behavior and pretending it doesn't exist. We would not be told we are overreacting or being too sensitive when we express our frustrations over being dispensable, disrespected, invisible, and ignored by majority groups. We would not have to not be seen, and we would not be called thus and savages as a means to explain away numerous and continued murders of black and brown lives. Statements like, quote, if he kept his hands on the steering wheel, he wouldn't have been shot, end quote, and, quote, minorities are always complaining about something, end quote, would sound as absurd to the speaker as the statements do to the people of color and our allies. And one person wrote, fear would be absent. Fear of physical and verbal discrimination, fear of policies, fear of recrimination at work, fear, period. And then what was asked would be present in our communities. Several themes arose. I'm going to highlight particularly one of them, but in doing my qualitative assessment of the different kind of documents, there were three that came up primarily, and the first one I think was the one that the vast majority of people of color identified, and that is that there would be representation in leadership positions in our community. Other ones having to do with climate, having to do with policy, having to do with educational policy, affordable housing, et cetera, et cetera. If the belief, I believe, would be, is that depending on whose hands those decisions are in, we may have some different policy outcomes. But in response, and in the theme of representation in leadership positions, responses were, more people of color in our community in leadership positions, city hall, police, county buildings, schools, representation and discussion making on policy, expenditures, programming, public safety, and more. Places of employment would have leadership staff from different backgrounds. Equal representation of black and brown people in all positions. People of color in positions of authority, police chief, teachers, principals, mayors. Diversity at every level, from bottom to the top. And in respect, comments on the white leadership that is in place. A person responded, "What I see in this community is a strong commitment to social justice from a large group of people that do not fundamentally understand the lived experiences of the people most impacted." This sort of middle to upper middle class liberalism that has little real experience with how social justice issues impact men and women is damaging to our community. So can we imagine a world in which things are different? The work I primarily do is looking at the white imagination, right? And looking at right now, what's feeding my soul is the research on unconscious bias or implicit bias that says that even people who are well-intentioned, count me among the group, even people who are well-intentioned, even people who've been doing work on these issues for decades, continue to hold biases that are operating on an unconscious level too often, that influence how we see the world and the decisions we make accordingly. One example of a study that talks towards leadership was a study that was done, and it's about how we assess quality. It was a study that was done where there was a fictitious person named Thomas Meyer who wrote a legal memo. And the legal memo, he was identified as a third-year associate, and it was given to senior attorneys to assess this memo for quality. And so the memo was given, the senior attorneys received it, and the only differences were Thomas Meyer was an associate. He was, am I out of time already? How much time do I have?
15 minutes.
I know, but do I have 1 minute left? Thanks, okay. So the only difference in this memo was that the author was identified as a black person or a white person, but otherwise similar credibility. 22 errors were embedded in this memo, and the decision about can you see quality is whose errors were found. In the black written memo, he received 3.2 out of 5 for quality. The white memo of the same memo, 4.1 out of quality. And in the intentional errors, the black memo, the errors were found. In the white memo, they were not. As we think of leadership, part of what that research talks about is what do we assess, what is behind our eyes as we look at who are the leaders in our community? Who do they need to be? I regret having accepted to speak today, mostly because what I should have said is respectfully declined and said no. But here's the names of 6 people of color who could do a phenomenal job, and I should have done that. And I have done that with every request since that day. You have on your sheet, on your table, a list of organizations, of leaders of color in our community. If we need to establish a different leadership structure in this society, I ask you to get to know those organizations. I ask you to get to know the people in those organizations. I ask you every time you are asked about a commission, about nominating someone for an award, about putting a committee, about who's going to run for election, about giving a speech, that you have at your ready the names of 6 phenomenal leaders of color in this community who will not only imagine and assist us in doing that, a world in which brown and black lives matter, but they will be part and parcel of creating that side by side with all of us. I thank you, and let's get on now to the real work of honoring the people who are doing the work. Thank you.
On behalf of the Human Rights Commission, I'd like to thank Diane for having agreed to speak anyway, and to present her with a plaque of appreciation.
Those are snazzy.
Good morning. My name is Andrea Cohen, and I'm a Human Rights Commissioner. And I get the honor to present this year's recipients. You know, this is the third time I have this awesome privilege. I'm humbled by their achievements. Every year, individuals and organizations prove Eleanor Roosevelt right, and I'm a big fan of Eleanor Roosevelt. Where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places, close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood she lives in, the school or college she attends, the factory, farm, or office where she works. All of you here this morning support and/or are involved in fighting for the dignity of everyone in this city. Human rights supersede those rights granted by law within sovereign nations. They are the rights every human being has and deserves just for being human. It's that simple. So I believe everyone here this morning deserves a round of applause. On with the show. Our first recipient is Jeannie Nunley. Jeannie has volunteered at the Hawkeye Area Community Action Program, also known affectionately as HACAP, over the past few years and has devoted countless hours and worked very hard for those in need. Jeannie has helped provide housing, stability, and growth to many low-income families who are in this community. As part of her volunteer work, Jeannie helped to coordinate HACAP's Homeless Children's Trust activities and has been the main person responsible for assessing the needs of each child. She coordinates with service providers from the Domestic Violence Intervention Program, Shelter House, and Prelude Behavioral Services in making the lists, checking sizes, providing transportation, setting out the boxes at designated sites, and sorting the donations according to age, size, and gender. For the HACAP Back to School Backpack event last August, Jeannie, along with her family members, cleaned up the little red schoolhouses and set them out at 12 locations throughout Iowa City, and then picked them up 2 weeks later. They sorted all the hundreds of donations into piles of pencils, papers, crayons, and with volunteer assistance filled the backpacks of 300 children. Then Jeannie saw to it that the HACAP families received their school supplies in a timely manner. Jeannie continues to have new and innovative ideas for streamlining the process of HACAP programs, including an additional evening get-together to provide space for the preparation of gingerbread houses for the annual Christmas party, and a shopping event for youth who are experiencing homelessness. Last year, over 160 children and their parents attended the Christmas party and shopping event. The objective of the Homeless Children's Trust is to make life better for families in need, and Jeannie Nunley has helped to achieve that goal. For these reasons, we are excited to award Jeannie the Linda Severson Service Award for 2016. Jeannie?
Thank you. Everyone deserves the opportunity to access resources to improve their lives and to gain the skills to make their communities a better place. For the last 16 years, I've had the honor of being a member of the HACAP family and doing just that. And I'm looking forward to many more years. Thank you to all of my family, my biological family, and especially my mom, who has made me the person I am today. Thank you.
The next honoree is the Pilot Club of Iowa City, which is receiving the Rick Graff Award. Dozens of local organizations have benefited from the selfless work of the 60-plus members of the Pilot Club. Their efforts and generosity exemplify the long-term commitment of a service organization to a specific cause and for the benefit of a specific group of persons. The group's focus is on education and prevention of traumatic brain injury and brain-related disorders, has had a significant impact on many in Iowa City. Their vision is a world where all are valued. For nearly 20 years, our neighbors with brain injuries or brain health problems have been able to continue reading fiction and nonfiction thanks to large print books at the Iowa City Public Library and other Johnson County libraries. The large print collections have grown significantly because the Pilot Club of Iowa City thoughtfully provides annual grants for them. Annual grants from the Pilot Club of Iowa City also helps organizations and agencies who work with our neighbors with mental illness, are on the autism spectrum, have dementia and Alzheimer's diseases, and help care their caregivers, and students pursuing advanced degrees in healthcare fields related to brain health. Recipients of past generous grants include Compeer of Johnson County, Iowa City Autism Community, Johnson County Visiting Nurse Association, National Alliance on Mental Health of Johnson County, Wendell Johnson Speech and Hearing Clinic, Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa, and Successful Living. In just the past 10 years, Pilot Club of Iowa City grants and scholarships have totaled more than $75,000. In addition to distributing grants every December, members at the Pilot Club also donate time to many projects, such as helping to fit children with new bike helmets, serve free lunch through the Crisis Center, install special accessible playground equipment for children with disabilities at the Terry Trueblood Recreation Area, and at the Arc of Southeast Iowa. When there is a community need related to their mission on brain health, fitness, and safety, they do their best to respond by sharing time, treasure, and talent. Certified nurse assistants at area facilities caring for those with brain illnesses and injuries have been the surprised recipients of special care packages themselves thanks to the pick-me-ups prepared and distributed by Pilot Club members. Each pick-me-up is a handsome gift bag containing useful and fun items with a note to express gratitude for the work done by the CNA. The Pilot Club of Iowa City's vision of a world where we are all valued and the work of its members to achieve the vision seem to perfectly fit the spirit of the Rick Graff Award. Please join me in giving a deserving round of applause for the Pilot Club of Iowa City. Chelsea Markle, Club President, will accept on behalf of the organization.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here this morning. However, I'm not alone. As mentioned, our club membership is 60 plus members strong, and we have many of them in the room this morning who I would like to stand briefly to be recognized as well. And it's on behalf of the Pilot Club of Iowa City that I want to thank the Human Rights Commission and their sponsors for providing this recognition, as well as thanking the Iowa City Public Library for their thoughtful nomination. Since pilots are often assumed, being in Pilot Club, that we are in fact airline pilots or perhaps the wives of airline pilots, I thought I would just take a moment to share our international service organization's mission with you. And so the mission of Pilot International is to influence positive change in communities throughout the world. To do this, we come together in friendship and give people an outlet for service. We focus on preparing youth and young adults for service, encouraging brain safety and health, and supporting those who care for others. And so we're very happy to be doing this work of this international organization right here in our own community. Thank you.
This year's Isabelle Turner Award goes to Tammy Nitin. Tammy has spent the last 3 years quickly learning that there are gaps in the children's mental health care system. She reached out to as many people as she could find for the services her family needed, but hit many roadblocks. Tammy knew if she was having difficulty finding these vital services, then other families were experiencing the same problems. She reached out across the state to see what was happening for children's mental health. She found not one group across the state to help these families struggling to get their children much-needed services. With the help of 2 other families, Tammy started Parents Creating Change, an advocacy, that's a difficult word, an advocacy group to advocate for state and local changes. Parents Creating Change partnered with the National Alliance on Mental Health Illness in Iowa, also known as NAMI, to create NAMI Iowa Children's Mental Health Committee, which works across the state to generate a children's mental health system redesign and to educate and inform decision makers. Tammy reached out to mental health organizations, individuals, parents, and professionals to join the coalition to share information such as previous efforts, new data, and best practices. With help from the committee, she has developed the structure, recruited volunteers, gathered materials, and forged partnerships. In addition, Tammy has been a tireless advocate who organizes rallies at the State House, generates media coverage, holds press conferences, and speaks at every opportunity about the importance of addressing the unique mental health needs of children and youth in Iowa. In doing all of this, she maintains a philosophy of openness and flexibility with parents and addressing the broad scope of need that includes all kinds of mental health. Please join me in giving a deserving round of applause for Tammy Nitin.
Thank you so much. This is quite an honor and extremely humbling in this crowd, I have to say. What the Human Rights Commission does is fundamental, essential work to the ideals that we say we espouse in our nation, caring for the most vulnerable, making sure that they don't experience any forms of violence, any forms of disempowerment. And so I thank you all for the work that you're doing. No one does this type of work alone, and I wanted Renee Spey to come up with me. She's my partner in crime. Without her, none of this work would have been possible. She helped me corral all the great people of Iowa who care about Iowa's kids into the coalition. And while we're very excited that things are happening, the state work group is slowly but surely making incremental change. And we're happy about that. We're happy that that resulted in part from our call for action, and I thank Renee for her help on that. Too many people to thank for this. Too many people are involved, but real quickly, I would just like to thank Jeffrey Lauer, who I see over there. He has really helped us figure out what we're doing, how to figure out the game, and told me one of the most important things, and that is the scariest and most moving thing for legislators is a group of angry moms. And he was right. And I want to thank Senator Joe Bolcom, because what really happened was a few years ago, I sat down as a very desperate mom not knowing what to do. And he said, tell your story. And honestly, as a mom, and I think this is true for many of us moms, we feel like as soon as someone knows we're just a mom, they stop listening to us, right? Whether we're talking about our child's medical care, whether we're talking about policy our children's needs, anything like that. The moment people know we're just a mom, we feel like no one's listening. And for someone to tell me that people specifically want to hear from the moms was incredibly empowering. And so I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful for all the courageous moms who have joined together to tell their story, and for all the courageous kids who have been willing to tell their story. Most of all, I want to thank my family, some of which who like to be quietly in the background, and I'll respect that. I'd like to particularly thank Cole, my son, who is very courageous about telling his story and quite an advocate of his own. My mom, who's made a lot of this work possible by coming here and keeping the household running so I can run to the State House and so on. And finally, my late husband, Sujeev, who is one of those who would be very furious with me mentioning him right now, who liked to be quietly in the background. All this coalition work was only possible because of his loving support, his quiet support, and his keeping the home front running while I was gone, Des Moines and what have you. And so he doesn't have a choice today. I get to give him as much attention as I want. So I dedicate this to him and his memory, and I thank all of you very much. Thank you.
I'm doing well on time, I see, so that's good. Our final honoree of the morning is Newman Monson Architects, which is receiving the Bill Reagan Community Award. Between 2004 and 2010, Newman Monson Architects volunteered all architectural services toward the design, development, and construction of the shelter house facility located at 429 Southgate Avenue. The project was more than 6 years in the making due to legal opposition that went all the way to the Iowa Supreme Court. Through it all, Newman Monson stuck by the side of Shelter House. It is because of their partnership, dedication, and volunteerism that Shelter House delivers services today in a well-designed, energy-efficient, and purposeful space. A space that is filled with natural light, easily maintained, structured and conducive to helping men, women, and their families move beyond the crisis of homelessness to the stability of their own homes. Now in 2016, Newman Monson has once again volunteered their services for Shelter House in our community in the design and development of the Housing First facility. Through their partnership, the Shelter House will develop 24 efficiency apartments and spaces through which on-site services will be delivered for people for whom homelessness has become a chronic condition. Newman Monson has embraced the Housing First initiative, which is also known as FUSE, or Frequent User Service Enhancement, and has set to work giving both form and shape to its hopes and aspirations of providing permanent homes for a very vulnerable population. Through their volunteer contribution to both projects, Newman Monson Architects has helped Shelter House to leverage limited resources, saving them $500,000. In so doing, Newman Monson Architects has advanced the mission of Shelter House. They have made and will continue to make a difference in the lives of hundreds of men, women, and children experiencing homelessness in our community for many years to come. Please give a very well-deserved round of applause to Newman Monson Architects. Accepting on their behalf is Kevin Monson.
Thank you very much. It's very humbling to be a part of this group and to receive this award. Newman Monson family cares deeply about our community and all of the people of our community. And we have to acknowledge that this community is very dear to our heart, but also has been very good to us as a company and allowed us to grow and thrive. We would like that to be the case for all people, especially the most vulnerable people of our community. And so it's so easy for us to give back in this way. And I have to thank those who every day provide the services for the most needy in our community. Thank you, Chrissy, for everything and your staff does at the Shelter House. Thank you for thinking outside of the box and trying to solve problems that are real and desperately need solutions. We're so thrilled to be part of the Housing First project because it's a terrible, important need that we haven't solved. And I think this is just the start of solving that wonderful, in a very wonderful way, protect those who are the most vulnerable in our community. And we're not done yet. The discussions within the community about other issues, the Access Project, which is just beginning to take shape, addressing the needs of people in medical illness crisis, those who are having substance abuse issues, and providing a healthy and humane way of dealing with these people is very exciting to see that we're going to address this and work community-wide to solve problems that are continuing every day in our family here. So we're very humbled by this award, and we thank you, but we thank those who work every day in this arena to make this a better place for all. Thank you.
I'm Joe Coulter of the Human Rights Commission. I want to thank all of you for coming today to this, our 33rd annual breakfast and awards presentation. I want to thank all of the awardees for the terrific accomplishments that they've made for human rights in our community. I want to also thank my colleague Diane Finnerty for her remarks. And I especially want to thank the members of our city government and our city council who support the Human Rights Commission efforts in the city. And I want to thank my colleagues on the Human Rights Commission and especially Stephanie Bowers for the excellent work that it's done here. Thank you very much, and let's give a final round of applause.
Watching City Channel 4 on TV, online, on demand, on Facebook, and now on the go on your mobile device.